point, he knows, what's his name out of Pittsburgh? Not Schachter, the brother-in-law. He knows all the top Jewish, Rosenthal. I mean, he's gotten to know all of them. Do you know the name Dan Shaughnessy, David?
I do not know that name.
Dan Shaughnessy is the longtime sports columnist, now one of many at the Boston Globe. He's met Dan, but Dan's daughter Kate was Jacob's first journalism teacher in high school. So he's been groomed, and at Michael Holly.
No, not that one. I know
Boston Globe, but also teaches at BU, and Shira Springer, who is Jewish. Boston Globe teaches it. So these are his teachers.
Yes, and at so for me, Syracuse always, let me make sure this is right. Okay, Syracuse always had, wait one second. Syracuse always had MLB Network alumni, and they came back and interviewed. So I met a lot of people there, but I wanted to be in front of the camera.
Yes.
So but I made a lot of connections because I used to always just talk with them.
Right. Well, that's what he's done. But he wants to write. He doesn't want necessarily. He
Yeah.
did do in front of the camera stuff at BU, but it's not his aspiration.
Right. For me it was. So that's why I was offered jobs there. I was very fortunate. But I've kept in touch with them as I've taken different.
Who's the one? Stop. No. Spilker? No, that's the sister. He's married to the cantor in Pittsburgh. He's a very prominent Jewish sports writer. He's Jewish, but he's a well-known name, and his name is escaping me now. Jeff Passan I met during the World Baseball Classic. Jacob hosted a panel of former players, current players, and he's become buddies with some of these people.
Yeah. Which is awesome because you're just kind of in the industry. It's just like some of the players,
And he's a Boston Red Sox fan, so the fact that he got to interact with all these people along the way, Chaim Bloom and.
But it's like they're less idols when you're used to being with them when you're in the same realm, than
yes. Well, same
when
is
you're
true in
kind of
any
like,
profession, sir.
Right.
When you're a kid, you look up to your rabbi, and then you find out your rabbi has feet of clay down the line. Oh, she's a human being. He's a human being. They're a human being. Anyway, Jim, to answer your question, it may well be that those are books for the taking, but that's a Sheila question.
Oh, okay.
But Ralph Daniel drove up yesterday. He said, I got 144 books to donate to the synagogue. I did tell him to put them on the top shelf, but I guess Sheila said, because all that up there was all donated since I was here, for sure.
I'm currently borrowing one. I've taken the book out from the library. I have it in my apartment. I borrowed it.
You're the one. We knew there was one person who took a book out of this library.
I know. You have to use your library card every once in a while in order to keep it active. Jim, do you have a prayer book? Do you need one?
Well,
we're going to give it, I'm going to say another 10 minutes. If we don't get a few more people, I think 3 is pushing the concept of community prayer. We could do a little something here. I don't want to do the Torah study that I'm going to do at 10:30, 10:40, but because there'll be others. But we could do something for a little bit.
I didn't see
you have somewhere to go. And
I didn't. Well, I didn't see Gil.
Anybody online?
I don't know the answer to that. I started streaming it just now, but
yeah, I don't know how to do it. So
I could check on my phone. So I don't know if he might have been online and maybe only heard the announcement that there wasn't going to be anything.
Could be.
I mean, it wouldn't be unique that there's only a few of us.
It's holiday season. People are crazed with everything that's going on. We never tried to do a weekly Shabbat morning service in my time. I think we did it once a month, what was called the traditional service. And then in my last 2 years, when this came out, the Steinsaltz Talmud.
It says one person is watching, but for all I know, that's actually me just looking at it on my phone.
It could be. This came out, the very first volume of Steinsaltz's English Talmud, which then came out in a different, I don't know if we have it here. And we had a group of 30 people, but in the end I think we were about 8 or 9, but we studied every Saturday morning a volume of Talmud. But David, either way, thank you for stepping up.
Yeah. I'm now prepared for any point. I put together a whole spreadsheet for myself so I knew what order things came in.
Good for you. I'm skeptical that, I don't know that we need to get to 10, but we need to be more than 3.
More than a trade.
There can't be more Torah scrolls in the building than people in the room. I think that's
Well,
a
they- I guess
fair, I think that's a fair,
I guess the question that we always ask is how can we get more people to attend in the morning? Because people do show up for Torah study, but
they do.
and people show up on Friday night, but they're not here on Saturday morning. And
Last
unfortunately,
night
I mean,
was
if you
quite-
count
I mean-
1, 2, 3, if you add, Bill, Mandy, and then Gil,
Right.
that usually is the group. I mean, I
Okay.
don't know if there's anyone else that does ever show up.
Yeah, there are other people who come in and out for this.
So I see Eliyahu every once in a while.
Yeah, I gotta get back in touch with him.
Who?
Eliyahu
Eliyahu.
Parker. Grew up here, made Aliyah, came back to Israel back to Jackson right after, May 7th.
What's his last name?
October 7th, Parker.
Eliyahu.
Mindy used to come sometimes.
Mandy must be sick today.
I don't know if Mandy's sick, she was here Tuesday night, but Bill told me, when he told me yesterday he wasn't feeling well, he said Mandy led last week and I'm not sure she's gonna be here. I know she also goes to the coast once in a while, so she has a friend down there. Here's what I will tell you, if there's anything on this table that you see that's not Jewish and you want it, take it. Because that's not gonna live in this library. I mean, there's no librarian who keeps this up anymore.
Yeah.
I mean,
But, like you
in
want
terms
Barack
of
Obama,
the
you want
authorship?
Henry Kissinger, like,
I didn't even look to see what was
well, I looked a little bit
Yeah.
yesterday.
Oh, the White House, I mean, the years of upheaval, the classic, I mean, these are either Jewish subjects or Jewish authors.
Right, but,
Sometimes
by the
both.
way, I didn't read this one. I just finished this guy's, he used to write mysteries. Now he's, he's now doing historical fiction. It's based in true historical events, and he's fleshing it out to tell the story.
And on top of
His new
that,
one,
yeah.
his new one is called, and he's doing with this other guy who I don't know of.
And he's a
Oh,
man.
wait a minute, I did read this one. His new book that's coming out sometime in the coming months is called The JFK Conspiracy. I literally finished listening to it here a few days ago. It's extraordinary. So this is a good read if you're interested in history, but history that's, he's telling the story. Here's an interesting novel. I mean, yes, it's Jewish, but it's in here. Michael Chabon, The Yiddish Policeman's Union. This is a great fiction, very much Jewish. I can't remember if I read this. Anyway, Ralph grew up here. He's Ralph Daniel III. And he was here when I was here. He's older than I am. He's a physician. I wonder if they're not downsizing. Because, Len Grossman. Problem is, I read mostly electronically these days. You see, like, this is about Camelot. I think he's Israeli. It's a good book. I know he lives in
About Camelot.
That's what it says. A young gifted knight named Colum arrives at Camelot. It's a novel. I mean, I know the name. I think
Yeah.
I've read some of his other stuff.
Interesting.
So
interesting
anything that's
title.
not, David, that's a different cursor. Oh, Shalom.
Oh, there is someone streaming because I just went on it and now it says 2. So hello, whoever that is.
The author of this book, I did some work with him when I was working for Hartman Institute.
Oh, thank you. I see the comments now.
Who is it?
It says Lauren's watching.
Lauren Brown?
There's no last name.
Lauren,
I'm not
it's
recommending that
Lauren.
anyone puts that online, but
It's Lauren.
the only Lauren who we have. I'm gonna say it's Lauren. Well, Lauren, whoever Lauren is.
Yeah.
So there is one person.
Explain to her that we are
We are
very
waiting
few
to
in the
see
room.
that she could hear. The audio's over there. We're waiting for. So that would make
A few
4 of
more
us
people.
total.
That's
So we're waiting
4.
for a few more.
I think if we get to 7 or 8, we're good to go, but.
I don't think we've ever gotten to. Have we ever gotten to 7?
Yes, we've had
Wow.
more than a minion since
Oh.
I've been
Oh,
here.
yes.
Really?
Oh, yes, but back in the fall, and.
That's amazing, because I've been here
pre-holidays.
pretty often, and I have not been here once where we've had 10.
No, we've had it.
That's amazing. I'm
And
glad to
it
hear
may have
that.
been, I don't, well, I won't say that.
I'm glad to hear that. I clearly have come
But
on the wrong
Torah
days.
study, we get a nice,
Oh,
a
Torah
nice
study.
crowd.
Torah study, yeah. People show up for Torah study, for sure.
They wanna sleep in on Saturdays.
Well, as I said.
Well, what's interesting is-
Thanksgiving to the end of December is a very busy season. People have holiday parties, they have family stuff, they're busy getting ready for holidays.
What's interesting is that,
If this
I
were
remember-
Hanukkah, we'd have more people.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, cause I've been coming, I know football season, I'm not here as often, but I fortunately this year have been able to more than, in the past, maybe
Yeah,
at least
what are you
50%.
covering today?
Jackson State in the SWAC championship.
Oh, so you don't have to go too far.
No, it's just at 1 PM it starts, and then I.
Why
have
do they
to
leave
drive.
the lights on in that stadium 24 hours a day? What a waste.
Do they? I don't know. I've
But
never
when I
really
drove
driven
here
by
this
when
morning,
it's
the
empty.
lights were on.
Well, this morning would make sense, cause they need them on because they're getting set up and everything. It's dark.
The sun
out.
is out.
Oh. I
And
don't
there
know,
were
I'll tell
no
you-
clouds while I was
What will be
driving.
interesting is if I get there at 1 PM, whether they're on or not. Like, I don't know.
They
maybe.
were on when I drove back
But,
last night.
yeah, no,
That
I
I
don't really
understand,
know.
but I'm looking at it and I said, is that so the planes don't hit it? I like in an age of scarcity and budgets, and it just seemed like, turn those off until noon.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows what they're doing or how dark it feels when you have the walls of the stands around you.
Yeah, I guess.
Uh,
I've never been inside of that stadium.
Okay, yeah, it's really cool. It's not like, your most modern stadium because it was built when it was built, and it's
Yes.
basically just, it's like a coliseum. It's just, the whole thing is one piece of brick, essentially. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that there have been. I like I said, I haven't been here every single time because of football season, but I haven't seen us ever reach 10, which is great.
The last
Yeah.
few there weren't, but we were close, we were missing one or two, but 3 seems.
Sure. That's pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty good if that's the case. But the question, so in New Jersey, growing up, I didn't really go to Torah study on Saturday mornings myself. I really started going to Saturday morning Torah study or anything when I was in Utica, New York, starting as a professional. And I joined that congregation and on Saturday mornings, and we did Torah study. There was no morning service,
Right.
but in New Jersey, I know that there was again, same as here, more traditional service on a Saturday morning, lay led, and then there's almost always every weekend a B'nai Mitzvah as well, just given how many people were there. So every weekend was almost full with that too, so it was very busy. But there was and they had a minyan on Sunday mornings too, really great. That's when I know I used to go for Hebrew school, and I'd see sometimes they'd call me in because they needed 10th, or there were a lot of people around.
Right,
But-
here's what we're gonna do.
They would do Torah study after. No, they do Torah study before the service. actually.
Right.
So it made the service later.
If I may suggest, Rabbi.
Yeah,
Let's just read today's Torah portion.
no, because we're gonna do that at Torah study. So here's what I'm gonna suggest,
Forgive me.
and why don't you send Lauren a message, or Lauren, you can hear me. We're gonna do liturgy Ask the Rabbi, so come have a seat, and any question, you'll monitor the chat, and any question you have about prayers, something about the prayer, it's not that I'm opposed to doing the Torah portion, but we're gonna do that at 10:30, 10:40.
Yes, sir.
So, lest I repeat myself, even if it's only to you.
The more the merrier.
We will, literally, or it doesn't have to be about the prayer book, but any, let's start with the concept of these prayers. You wanna ask about the wording of a prayer, the origin of a prayer. That doesn't mean I have the answers. Let me be clear up front. Or anything else. We'll have a little discussion for a little while. We'll take a break. You'll go do your thing, Mr. David, and then we'll resume with Torah study at the appointed time. So, and you'll monitor if Laura has a question for us.
Is Musar
Sure,
simple?
you can do that.
Yeah, Musar's fair game. The two of you in the room certainly are part of the Musar group, and
Yes.
Well, I was upset to miss Tuesdays, although I did have, oh, we have 3 people online now, including me, so that's 2 others.
More than
Someone just joined. I don't know, whoever joined, can you put your name in the chat so we know who you are, so we can chat with you?
if we get a few more there, then we got a million, or close to a million.
Sure. I did have a lot of, it was Hakarat HaTov this week, yes?
Yes, correct.
Finding-
Hakarat Tov in the world of Musar means gratitude, although the literal meaning is recognizing the good.
Yes, and I had a bunch of different things pop up, especially with Thanksgiving being recently, but Jewish related, not Jewish related, pop up in my Instagram feed, things like that, and that related to it. So I had my own kind of adventure with that this week, but I was upset that I couldn't be there on Tuesday this week. We had the award presentation for.
When we're on Zoom, when I'm back in Massachusetts, I'm able to record it. But
yes,
it's a little dicey to do that when we're live in the room. I can record it on my phone, but it's disembodied voices, and who knows what it picks up. Jim, you had a question.
Yes, well, regarding Musar, the other night I brought up the issue of the citation from Leviticus 18:5. You shall keep my laws and rules, by pursuit of which you shall live. That's, I think, one of the things I find fascinating or important is, what's it called?
Just in case it wasn't audible, hello.
Nefesh?
Whoever just joined as the third person, can you put your name in the YouTube chat so that we know who's here, so we know who's able to chat with us for the moment. Shabbat shalom.
We're doing Ask the Rabbi, so if you have a question, put it in the chat, and David will lift it up. We're well short of we're more than a few tacos short of a combo plate today. Go ahead, Jim.
No, but the reason I brought it up the other night is I was impressed by this article by Asher Lopatin.
Yeah, I know Asher.
Yeah, regarding
Lopatin.
Yeah, Lopatin. I stand.
Some Orthodox rabbi.
Yes.
Go ahead.
It was about Pikuach Nefesh.
Yes, Pikuach Nefesh is the principle that in Jewish tradition we are allowed to set aside almost all Jewish law to save a life. Kind of goes, I didn't talk about this last night, but it kind of goes with part of my message about each human being is created in the image of God, and if we are, each and every one of us, the image of God, then we are, according to Jewish tradition, not only allowed, but in essence commanded to do anything we can to save even a single life, which is why the Talmud says, in Tractate Sanhedrin, one who saves a single life, it's as if they saved an entire world.
For example, if you're in a holiday where you're supposed to be fasting, but you have to eat food for the purposes of medical,
absolutely,
dietary,
no
that's
question.
Obvious. Yeah.
My wife, when we were here, actually, because she gave birth to 3 children while we were here, did not fast any Yom Kippur because she was either pregnant or nursing.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, she went a good stretch without fasting. I don't even ask her if she fasts these days, but yeah, if there is a reason, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples. First of all, the 3 laws you cannot set aside. You cannot murder someone to save a life. So, for example, if David came to you and said, Jim, you killed the rabbi or I'm going to kill you, you can't do that. Because and this is in the Talmud, you are, and in the Midrash. It might even be Rabbi Akiva, I can't remember who said it, but when you make that decision under David's threat, you are deciding, this is literally the language of the rabbis, whose blood is redder. You're deciding your life has more value than mine. You can defend yourself against David and try to stop him.
Okay.
But you can't kill me to save your life. That's 1. 2, and this is where Leviticus 18 comes in. You brought this up the other night, and I said, well, okay, I didn't even realize there was a verse worthy of reading in chapter 18, because chapter 18 of Leviticus is all of the prohibitions, or most of them in the Torah, about forbidden intimate relationships. It's mostly about homosexuality. And, you know, we understand that those are, and we live in the buckle of the Bible Belt here, so we know, in fact, I had an encounter with it Monday night outside of Hal and Mal's, that there are those who think this is God's law and we have to really stand up for this. They had in the back room some kind of an event going on that involved people of different gender identities. And so there were a group of people outside protesting, very loudly, very small group, but very loudly protesting. They tried to engage with me and I opted not to engage. Not because I'm afraid to, I just didn't, I was waiting for friends and I didn't want to start my evening that way. So you cannot commit one of the prohibited sexual relationships, prohibited in mostly Leviticus 18, a little bit in Leviticus 20, to save a life. So, you know, let's say one of you had a family, and let's say, we'll flip it, and Jim said, David, sleep with your daughter or I'm going to kill her. You can't do that. Okay? And the third one is idolatry. You cannot commit an act of idolatry to save a life, because then in the eyes of the rabbis you are denying God. And if you deny God, which is the central precept in classic Judaism and even classic Musar, we talked about that in class. So other than that, 2 examples. If it's a kibbutz in Israel, I'm sort of dating myself because kibbutzim are a whole different reality today. But if it's a religious kibbutz in Israel and someone needs to go to the hospital, someone can drive them to the hospital on Shabbat or even Yom Kippur, but then they stay there. Unless, and there is a gray area, that car needs to be returned because it's the only vehicle if somebody else should need it. When I lived in Teaneck, New Jersey, a community next to your community, where I became the rabbi after I left Jackson in '92, very Orthodox community, even more so now than it was when I was there. We had a volunteer, they still have a volunteer ambulance corps, which is kind of stunning to me in a community of that size and vibrancy. There were members of the Orthodox community who were part of up to and including the Chabad rabbi. And who I'm still in touch with, he lives in Israel. We had coffee a few years ago when I was in Jerusalem. And if it was their turn to take Shabbat as their tour, they would do it. Because that's pikuach nefesh. That's a longer answer than you bargained for.
No,
now,
no.
go on. Asher is one of the great modern Orthodox minds and rabbis. I got to spend some time with him a few years ago when I was working for Hartman, and he was the guest speaker and I was the staff person up in Toronto. And we spent a few hours over, well, in his case, a bourbon. I don't remember what I was drinking, but it wasn't bourbon in those days. Now
Chai latte, vanilla latte?
no, it was evening, so I wasn't drinking that. But anyway, he's incredible. I think he's back in Chicago now. But go ahead. What's your? I'm giving you more.
And Lauren actually asked the question too.
Okay, well let Jim. I keep
No.
Well, did you get to ask
That's
the
what I'm
actual
saying.
question?
I
Really
did, no, you've given me whatever, and because he Lopatin, he also cites the Talmudic sage Rabbi Akiva,
Yeah.
by the pursuit of which man shall live, shall not die.
Right.
Built into every mitzvah.
Yes. And that principle, which I actually didn't learn from Asher, I learned it from my teacher, Daniel Hartman, who has a lot to say about it. And his father, Rabbi David Hartman, may he rest in peace, who was also my teacher. And in the Yitz Greenberg, who I mentioned last night, same generation, same class of these modern Orthodox rabbis who had a profound influence on me. I first heard David Hartman when I was studying in Israel in 1976-77. And Daniel, his son, says, you know, we have a great diversity in the Jewish community. And a lot of different opinions. We're no different than any other religious, political, social, cultural, a lot of difference of opinion, and in some cases Many people think, but my opinion is the truth, right? Here's the principle that he's quoting from the Talmud, which I wish some of our co-religionists nowadays would remember. God gave us the laws according to Rabbi Akiva and others, and it says in the Torah, "V'chai b'hem," that you should live by them. And the idea is not that you should die by them.
Yes.
And that's what Asher's
Yes.
talking about. Even though I haven't read what you're quoting, I know exactly where he's coming from.
You can have this.
All right, well, afterwards, let's get Lauren's question.
Yes.
All right.
When we get so strict with matters of tradition, ritual, and law, I could apply it to the American situation too. I could have applied it in my remarks last night. Are we enhancing life, or are we leading people to die? That's the principle behind V'chai b'hem. God gave us the laws so we should live by them, not so that we should divide ourselves and make life tough, diminish the image of God, and ultimately some people will die because of it. I could apply it to the medical insurance narrative of recent years up to and including this week. But what's Lauren's question?
Yeah. Lauren's question is, historically, since much of Israel history is agricultural, do we have records of how the farmers kept Shabbat, prayers, etc., while ensuring the welfare of their animals?
Great question. Great question. And actually, I can touch on a couple of Jewish principles there. Yes, if you read the Torah carefully, the laws, many of them, not all of them, are for an agrarian society. So they wouldn't work the fields on Shabbat. But, specifically, and I saw this on kibbutz, even though the kibbutz I lived on for a year was not a religious kibbutz. Even on a religious kibbutz, there's a principle in Jewish tradition, rabbinic law, called Sa'ar Ba'alei Chaim, the suffering of other living beings. And it's somewhat an offshoot from Genesis chapter 1, the story of creation. And the notion is, yeah, we're the ones, human beings, who were created in God's image, but God created all living beings, all life. And we are not permitted to cause suffering to animals. So if we didn't feed them because it's Shabbat, or we didn't care for them if there was a problem because it's Shabbat, that's not permitted. That's exactly, see if I'm helping with Lauren's answer. Read me the question again, because there was another dimension to it.
Yeah, so again, she wrote, historically, since much of Israel's history is agricultural, do we have records of how the farmers kept Shabbat, prayers, etc., while ensuring the welfare of their animals?
First of all, in biblical times, prayer was not a mainstay in Jewish life. Prayer evolved as a replacement for sacrifice as a mainstay of Jewish life, along with study, what we're doing now and what we're going to do a little later, because once the temple was destroyed, we couldn't offer the sacrifices. So prayer and study became the replacement. That's why if you go to a traditional synagogue this morning, less this morning, but still this morning, Shabbat, but especially during the weekdays, large parts of the worship, not in the main part of the liturgy, but in the preliminary, and even in a few places in the main part of the liturgy, there are these long sections from the Torah and the Talmud about sacrifice. We can't do it, but let's learn about it. But prayer, so they didn't pray per se. We know that they prayed in biblical times. The book of Psalms is our evidence. And there are a few incidences in the Torah. But prayer, so they would not work on Shabbat. They would care for their animals. They wouldn't tend their fields. It was a day of rest. And there's even a thing in the Torah and then elaborated in rabbinic tradition that on the eve of Shabbat, meaning Friday in our language, God would cause a double portion of the manna, to fall, so when the Israelites collected it, they had enough to tide them over for Shabbat, because they weren't allowed to even go out and gather the manna on Shabbat. So, yeah, Shabbat, there's a book that came out while I was here in the 80s and 90s by Thomas Cahill, not a Jew, called The Gifts of the Jews. I
Yes.
mentioned it before.
Yes.
And it's one of what was, I don't know how far he went with this. He conceived of a 7-volume set of the great history of the great and the contributions of the great civilizations of human history. The first book was The Gift of the Jews. 2 things that I remember from the book, I'm sure there are others, that he names it somewhere here in the library, because I put it here, unless somebody took it, is the concept of one God, monotheism, and the Sabbath concept. And think about it. The Sabbath concept, even though we observe it differently, Jewish tradition, it's a mainstay principle. Maybe not in evidence in the physical library this morning, but a little later there'll be more people here for Torah study. In Christian tradition, although they moved their Sabbath to Sunday, Sabbath is, mainstay principle. In Muslim tradition, Friday, but still a mainstay principle. So Cahill's point is that the Jews are the ones who introduced that concept. Maimonides in the 12th century says, observe Shabbat and you know that at least 1/7 of your life will be spent in renewing yourself and rest. It's not like we don't sleep every day. It's a big issue in the media today, the importance of sleep and how do we enhance our sleep, and I'm reading articles even in the last 24 hours about it. But the Sabbath, so Sabbath in biblical times was sacrosanct, but there were no synagogues. People didn't go to synagogue. There was no community prayer. They didn't go to pray. It was a day of rest, but yes, Sa'ar Ba'alei Chaim. I'll give you a different example, and if I'm being too ponderous here, like, rein me in.
Now, Lauren says you were answering her question well.
Thank you. Ask Lauren what her last name is. I'm just
Revel.
Rebel.
Revel, okay. Hi, Lauren. Now I derailed my own thought.
Yet an example of the day of rest.
It'll come back to me. Senior moment, pardon me. Other questions?
My question for you that I've wanted to ask for a while is not necessarily a religious thing, but I was curious what inspired you to become a rabbi and go down this path, where did you find, I'm very interested always in people's inspirations for doing what they do. And of course,
Receiving the call.
Yeah.
Well, I
don't know if I understood it as that, as a call in those days. Here is the answer I originally gave, even at my admissions interview for seminary. And ultimately, in an article that was written where I was interviewed in Israel in 76, 77, as one of 4 or 5 younger Jews who were interviewed about their commitment to Judaism. And it appeared in the World Union for Progressive Judaism, which is the worldwide reform movement, liberal progressive movement, had a periodical in those days, like many places. Now everything's online, right? So I grew up, I'm the oldest of 3 boys in my family. When I entered 2nd grade, my parents joined the synagogue around the corner, literally around the corner, Reform Synagogue, because it was time to send Eric to Hebrew school. My home wasn't particularly religious. We weren't necessarily Shabbat observant at any level, but they joined the synagogue because I had to go. But in my family, we're talking the 60s, I guess. Yeah, they didn't join till the early 60s. We went to services almost every Friday night. Yes, we went out for ice cream afterwards or whatever, often with other members of the community, especially as the years went by. My father ultimately served as president of the synagogue. Then we left that synagogue because we moved. And then, apropos of our conversation before, the 2 synagogues, the one we had belonged to and the one we were now members of, extreme opposite ends of the same town on Long Island, merged. My parents were both on the board. They were very active. I was the junior youth group president. Because I took up the guitar and song leading, I taught music in the Hebrew school because we had a volunteer teaching faculty in the religious school, and that was really part of how so I became very, very strongly committed just because my family made it a priority. Not, again, we weren't Shomer Shabbat, we weren't strictly Sabbath observant, and by many respects I'm not now. I drove here today from Bellhaven, I mean, let's, Bellhaven community area, Fairview. And in high school, I got involved in NIFTY, which was the youth movement of the Reform movement, the local chapter being the Long Island Federation of Temple Youth, LIFTY. Ultimately became an officer in LIFTY. And I would go to every conclave and event, Torah Corps we had in those days, people who really wanted to study more, I don't remember how often it was because we were scattered all over Long Island and Queens, but it was, many times a year it was extra commitment. And we'd go on these week-long retreats, and there would be rabbis. And I met some great rabbis who became models for me. But I also was in the LIFTY choir, which used to travel around with the LIFTY dance group to different synagogues. In those days, there were over 40 synagogues, Reform synagogues on Long Island and Queens. Now it's probably half that. And we would perform at the Oneg Shabbat or during the service. And we would hear all these rabbis talk about how important the youth were, and we got to put our time and our money into our youth. And then I found that, well, that was a good tagline, but many of them weren't living up to it. Even on those week-long retreats, I felt like, you're not really taking us seriously. So at some point along the way, I got it in my head, well, before you criticize, and I had become a song leader, so I was leading worship, and somewhere in all of that, I said, well, before you criticize all these rabbis, which in those days were all men, why don't you see if you could do better? And so in college, I got involved in Jewish life. I helped start a reform group on campus, even as I was a leader in the Hillel. I was teaching in a number of synagogues. I was traveling to do weekend retreats, psalm leading, and being a staff member. Again, meeting rabbis who would say the right thing, but nobody had cell phones. In these days, if I were on a conclave, I would bet you that every rabbi is off in a corner scrolling on their phone or their iPad instead of sitting on the floor with the kids, and I just was really committed to being inspired the way I had been. And that ultimately led me to rabbinic school. My father, may he rest in peace, died back in June, says that at my confirmation at the end of 10th grade, there were 30 of us, we were talking about that before, right?
Yeah.
There were 30 of us in my class. We each gave a speech. At least that's my
It's
memory.
good that there were 30 by the time you were in confirmation, because when we got there were only 5 of us left at that
Right.
point.
I think there were 20 or 30 of us. 2 of us became rabbis, by the way. Classmates in rabbinic
Wow.
school. Roommates for 1 year. And I gave a speech. It's 1 page. I have it somewhere at home. My father gave me the copy. I quoted Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken, which to this day is a very important and inspiring prayer to me, poem to me. And I talked about taking the road less traveled, my commitment to the Jewish community and youth and study. And my father says, that's when I knew you were going to go to rabbinic school. I said, those words are not in there. He said, you announced to us. And the last piece I'll say is when I did finally apply to rabbinic school, my grandmother, may she rest in peace, my mom's mom, said, what kind of job is that for a nice Jewish boy? Literally, that's a cliche, but it literally happened to me. She was proud of me. Other questions?
That's funny.
That was the inspiration initially.
Yeah.
And in some ways, David, it still is an inspiration. It's why I love what I'm going to do tomorrow morning with our school children. It's why I love what I did Wednesday night with our post-bar mitzvah confirmation class, which is not 10th grade. It's anybody post-bar mitzvah. It's if I were really living here when there were youth events. And I told the person who runs our youth group, if there's a softy event when I'm here, one weekend, tell me about it. I'll go. Now, I worked at camp as faculty. I was dean of faculty. I worked at camp as a staff member. I still believe that it's really important for Jewish leaders, rabbis, cantors, educators, and lay people to take young people seriously. So that was my initial inspiration. I didn't think we weren't being mistreated, don't get me wrong, certainly not in any criminal manner. But I challenged myself, see if you can do what you don't think they're doing. And that was at least what I remember as my initial inspiration.
And have you always been as much of a reader as you clearly are with all the different books that you're quoting? Because for me, I have
Yeah.
not been, but
Yeah.
only in recent years have I become more of a reader, and I don't even know.
I
if
think
still
I've always
consider
been a
myself.
reader. I think I've always been a reader. It was instilled in me. Actually, as a young child, living in the community I grew up in Long Island, there was a bus. I don't remember whether it was run by the library, it was run by the community you could take to the town library, which was way on the other side of town, where I lived. And many times on the weekend, I would take the bus to the library, yes, with a friend, and we'd spend hours in the library. Yes, we'd go to the store nearby and get something to eat and whatever. But yeah, I've always been drawn to libraries and books. It's why to this day, my personal library is probably a third of what it was when I left my full-time congregation 7.5 years ago. And my wife keeps telling me, you still have too many books. And I still say, but these are my friends, I've studied them, some of them I haven't gotten to study yet. You know, even my Musar library, which 7 years ago probably consisted of 5 books, is probably close to 100 volumes now. You know, and I keep saying to myself when I go to buy a new book, why are you buying a new book?
I'm getting books for free from the library or
I do a lot of
online.
that.
I have like the whole. The funny thing is, I'll get books because I'm like, ooh, let me get this book because I want to have this. I really want to own this and read this. And I have books now. My library is increasing, my physical library of books. But then I'm like, okay, good, I have that. Now let me read all the ones I'm not sure I have from the library first.
Right,
And I
right.
never.
I do a lot of
e-books.
e-books since around 2015. Political season was heating up. I couldn't listen to the news anymore in my car. And since then, I only listen to audiobooks and an occasional podcast in the car. I don't put the
I've become a big podcast listener too. That's a big evolution in my life from around 20. Like I didn't know what a podcast was actually until, and they were new, but not that new by the time I started listening to them in like
Well, I
2016.
think I'm the only one left in the world who doesn't have a podcast.
Have a podcast? Will you start one?
I actually do have one.
I have an episode actually to forward you. You might find it interesting.
Please.
It's by a rabbi he's based in Houston, and it's very interesting because it was the first time I had found a podcast that was like Jewish related, and I actually did really like
Yeah.
it. And it has like
What's
5
his name?
different ones. Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe.
Yeah, he's the grandson,
I
known
figured it's
of
must be
Shlomo
related.
Wolbe, who I keep mentioning in Musar.
I figured it had to be related. 'Cause
There
you
are 2
mentioned, but-
grandsons living in Houston. My teacher, Alan Marinas, actually introduced me to one in email. I wrote to him, but he never wrote back. Yeah, those are Rob Volbe's grandsons.
I figured every time you've mentioned him, I figured it was related somehow because it
Right.
just.
I've seen their stuff, I have
he
not
talks
listened.
about he talks about the family only rarely, but I can't say I've listened to every episode ever.
Right.
But I am subscribed to the Ethics podcast, the This Jewish Life podcast, and like the Torah podcast, and I listen to one here
the
and there.
ethics one is basically Musar.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay?
And
And
I
that's
was
because his
hearing-
grandfather, who died in 2005, was probably one of the greatest Musar figures of the recent generations.
Interesting.
Anything else from the chat?
Lauren was just adding into less of a question and more of just an addition to what you were saying too, where she's agreeing that she wishes there were more young adults / youth things going on in for Judaism in Mississippi. But of
Right.
course, she says specifically how busy we are, and knowing that those of us who are still here by the time we graduate high school
Right.
are spread out across the state in very sparse numbers,
Right.
or we've moved here from New Jersey.
Right. Okay, David can bear witness. There were a whole gaggle of people his age
I was
last
gonna-
night
I was going to respond
at
to you, Lauren,
services,
saying,
and I have been discussing with the membership committee and some of the leaders. I said, there are a lot of young Jewish professionals in this community. I keep bumping into them. They're not necessarily part of our congregation, but we should reach out to them. And that's why I said to you guys last night, sometime in the new year, but then we modified it. And I said this to the leadership. I want you to do this. I want to see if there's a private space we can get at Fertile at the brewery. And I want to invite all the young, and you guys are the ones who are going to know them, the young Jewish
Well, if we
folk
do,
who
those are the
in
four I
town.
know, and it's doubled in size only around the time you got here because Laura and Gwen both showed up for the first time on the same
Right.
Friday night Shabbat. They had both just moved here.
Gwen came,
Ironically,
I
both
met
from
her
the same
at
place.
Tashlich, and
Yeah.
yesterday was the second time I've seen her.
Yeah, and so Vivian and I, Vivian also
Vivian
being from New
teaches,
Jersey.
so Vivian I know.
She's also from New Jersey, which is
Right.
kind of funny.
But I want to get you all together, not for any purpose other than A, being a resource and letting you know I'm here for you, and B, making sure you all know one another.
Yeah, I was telling them.
Because it's not, it's just like this community could do something for the young Jews. Why all these young Jewish professionals, also the Institute for Southern Jewish Life staff?
Yeah.
There are probably 20 people in your age group in this community. We don't know who all of them are.
Really?
But if
You
we
think
did a
20?
little
That's a lot.
bit of outreach
I didn't know.
and got you all together, so maybe you'll go play Frisbee together. Maybe you'll all have, you were talking last night, New Year's Eve together.
Yes,
Maybe
well,
you'll all,
exactly.
it's called building community.
I said this last night. I said, yes, I'm a sportscaster, and I think that obviously I'm a public figure, so that's the thing people know about me, and that's the thing people always say about me, because that's how people relate to me, and that's how people know, whether I know them personally at a deeper level or just know them generally.
I'm sorry if I
No.
cubbyholed you last night.
No, I thought that was funny. I was like, David from Bergen, that's totally how the Torah would have referred to me.
Yes,
you know, like,
yes,
David
yes.
from Bergen. That's how I would have been known.
Right.
No, you're not. There's nothing to be sorry about there. That's
Right.
totally. It's fine, and I do this. I know that's thing. But my point being, like, I love what I do for my job. But what I actually I think is like my purpose in life as I lead. My bag here has the word RIWA on it. Through Rotary International, I lead a youth leadership program
Oh, wow.
for high school juniors, and I've gotten involved in it. Not only am I now the program director after being a volunteer now for the past 10 years since I went to the program, as of next year, will be the entire state of New Jersey as one thing together,
Nice.
because they're regionalizing, because Rotary, like other organizations, is losing members, so they're kind of, but anyway, right now it's all of North Jersey, which is still double the size that it was even last year. But I'm the program director there. I've gotten involved. I volunteer here in Mississippi on the committee. I've been to California 3 times, actually. I've flown out there for this program. I've connected with people from Florida. I had them come to my program. We led it virtually during the pandemic and created a whole website in Massachusetts. We had someone from Israel, actually, who attended our program, which was a surprise. It was a Nebraska-hosted program, but they had a youth exchange student, and he was in Tel Aviv. I thought that was amazing. But I feel like I told them, I said, I feel like my actual purpose in life, or what I actually feel like is the thing I do, is bring people together. Like, I just love being with people, which is why I love sports, by the way. That's
Right.
that's the umbrella statement into how I got into sports.
Right.
Is that I didn't know sports reporting was a thing until middle of high school, but I knew that I liked sports because it brings people together, and
Right.
we could all be on the same team and not even know each other and have all of our differences, but be one team and one community. High five the person next to me, I don't even know them, like all those experiences. So I told them, I was like, hey, let's get together. And so it was funny though, because Vivian and I have been hanging out for a while. I've known her basically the entire time I've been here.
Mhm.
I think she was here first because she went to college here. So I met her, and then I really never got to know many of the ISJL people as well. Just different hours, different times in
Right.
the building, I guess.
Right.
Didn't really see many of them. Although Zoe and Anna, I don't know who of them are still here. I heard their names.
Zoe
So I
just
have met
became
them.
the assistant director at Jacobs Camp in Utica.
Oh, amazing.
Her father or stepfather was my student when I was
Ah.
here. The people who lit the candles and did Kiddush last night,
Yes.
that's her grandmother.
Oh, I didn't know that. Perfect. But I have met them because I've
I
seen
only
them
met
around.
Zoe in passing for a second,
Yeah.
but
And I know that Macy also came up. Also, you know Macy very well. He came up. He's like, I want to get you all together. You should come. He offered. He heard what you said. He's like, I offered my house as the place. If he,
Yeah.
I love very welcoming. But yes, the crew that was standing there, the 4 of us, had doubled in size pretty quickly.
well, let's do
when
something
they
with
showed up.
that.
No, 100%.
And it's not for me. It's exactly what you said. Look, I'll give you an example from.
Well, you're part of the youth here too.
Relatively speaking. Look, a member came
Yeah,
to the
words.
door earlier this week who I hadn't seen in 32 plus years. And I knew I'd recognize them, but 32 years is a long time. he just handed me something. Could you put this in the office? I said, sure. You know, how you doing? Remind me who you are. So he told me his name, and I asked him by name how his wife's doing, and if they're still running the business that I knew they ran back in the day. And he looked at me, he said, who are you? So I said, I'm Rabbi Gervis. He almost fell over. I said, Bob, come on in. We sat literally right here for about 20 minutes chatting. And at one point in the conversation, you know, because part of my experience in returning here is I'm meeting people a lot of people who I knew back then.
I think I've been in the room for some of those moments where you're like, oh.
Some of whom I was in my 30s. They were pretty old back then, and I'm still visiting some of them. They are old, some of them in their upper 90s. But I looked at him and said, Bobby, forgive the impertinent question, how old are you? And he told me, and I said, oh, okay, you know, I would have thought you were older. And he said, well, how old are you? And I told him. He said, no way. And he guessed probably about 18 years younger than I am, 15 years younger than I am. I said, no, I was a kid when I was here, but it wasn't my first pulpit. We had 3 of our kids here. I came married, which is unlike not all, but many of the rabbis who have come to Jackson, including Rabbi Rosen. And 32 years is a long time. You know, now I'm a grandfather of 5. So.
Oh, I am terrible at, I don't try and guess ages, but I'm definitely terrible at guessing, at even figuring. I mean, I can generally sense, right, I know the difference between my 100-year-old
I'm not part of the
grandfather and
youth,
me, but
relative to a few of the
I-
members I am, and
Yes.
my vibe is a little younger than my numbers.
I
Let's
don't
put
know.
it that
And
way.
I say that as someone who, like, you know, I cover all different sports, people of all ages from
We just
middle
discovered
school,
this morning we're the
professional.
same age. We were born the same year.
Wow.
Okay? Now, no commentary whatsoever, but, and I'm not gonna ask you, I don't wanna embarrass anybody, and I don't wanna.
I'm 27.
You're my son's age. He turned 27 2 weeks ago.
Oh, happy birthday.
My youngest, he just got engaged.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. Mazel
So,
tov.
he's the sports journalist.
Yes, we are the same person.
I just turned
Except I'm born in
68.
August.
So,
Yeah, I
any
don't believe
last
that.
questions? We're gonna
Well,
stop.
we do have a question on here. I don't know who this is. Hello, thanks for being here. Who posted, because the screen names are definitely not people's real names here, but someone asks on this fitting topic. Hi, Rabbi. Did you know Al Binder when you were at Beth Israel?
Absolutely. I was talking about Al yesterday. So Al Binder was a very prominent
We have 4 people who joined that.
criminal. See, now we almost have enough Romanian. We're running out of time.
No, I don't know who's here, but hopefully they read the comments.
Well, tell us who you are, just so we know who came. Put your name in the chat. Al Binder, whose sister was Judy Feldman, whose husband was Irv Feldman. Irv and Judy owned the Old Time Deli, which I miss every time I drive by, whatever it is now. Some kind of sports thing, I think, at Highland Village. Al was one of the most prominent criminal defense lawyers in the country. He was a pretty gruff guy, but at one point during my years here, he was in the hospital, and I was visiting him, and we had a lot of really good conversations, and he taught me a lot about why he did what he did. You know, the most famous case I think he ever had, I could be wrong, was Wayne Williams, the Atlanta child killer.
Yeah.
He was his defense lawyer. Al passed, I don't know how many years ago. His daughter Lisa used to be in practice with him. I understand she's now in Nashville, remarried, and doing other stuff, not a lawyer. But yes, I knew Al Binder.
This was Steve Toulos, if I said that
Hey,
right,
Steve.
who asked that question.
Great.
Well, I
Absolutely knew Al.
I have 2.5 questions.
Okay.
That I would want to, you know, you got the reporter in the room, but you see,
Yes.
I'm not a question asker because I'm a reporter journalist. I'm a journalist because I'm naturally curious, and this is
Which is what we're supposed to be in Judaism.
what we are.
Yes. We are the people who ask questions.
Oh, that's
And
it.
we answer questions
With more
with questions, not with answers.
You don't get that many bucks by,
Right.
you know. So, number 1 is, do you have a, like, favorite Torah portion or Judaism text that sticks with you, or is there one that is not favorite, because I wouldn't even be able to choose one either, but is there something that has stood out to you closely in your life? it was no secret that Rabbi Rosen, it was like Cain and Abel was his thing.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not asking because of that. I just know
Right.
that people may, like me, I'm not the alone.
I'll
in
try to
having
give you,
things.
first of all, it's evolved over the course of my life.
I imagine so.
I have loved studying. I have had different passions. Some of you may remember, not either of you, Rabbi Stephen Weiland, who was the interim rabbi here for a year, kind of visiting like I am this year. Steve Weiland was in New Jersey when I was in Teaneck, and we became study partners for 7 years. We knew each other previously from working at camp, and we would study. Initially, we were studying Torah commentary on the weekly portion by a 15th century Spanish figure named Don Isaac Abravanel. And then we got busy studying early Hasidic texts. And if you were to come to my home and look at the library, in a section of it that I rarely touch now, I probably have as many Hasidic texts as I now have Musar texts. So for a very long time, and I was curiosity when I would go down to Borough Park to buy books, you know, like or the Lower East Side or whatever, because, you know, what does a Reform rabbi want with this stuff? But I've always loved text study. So the short answer to your question right now, and part of the inspiration for what I'm doing outside of Beth Israel, but also at Beth Israel, and what I hope to do in the years to come as I move towards retirement, is Musar. Because Musar, you know, how can we be the best version of the person we can be by working on our soul traits, was a hidden aspect of Jewish tradition to most of us till about 25 years ago. For me, it was only about 15 years ago. And I mean, I knew the word, but I hadn't studied any of it. Mm. And I think it might be the most valuable part of our tradition and the most relevant that we need in a world as complicated and confusing and divided as ours. So my passion in recent years, you two know it from studying with me, has been Musar. And I'm doing a weekend on Musar in West Palm Beach at a synagogue there next weekend. And I'm hoping, I don't know, I still have a dream of writing a book, but I haven't convinced myself that what I would write would add anything to the discussion other than regurgitating what others have written. So I'm still searching for the niche. I'm getting close to it. But for 5 years, for the Musar Institute, the other organization I work for, part-time, I've been leading a project, and lately, it's only me, writing a weekly Torah commentary through the lens of Musar. But I won't repeat myself. That's why I didn't want to study the Torah portion while we were having this discussion, because we're going to do that in a little while. So I hunt, and very often I am finding things not in English, translating them, and writing every week a new commentary on the Torah portion with some classic Musar text as its inspiration, but writing it in a way that I think is relevant for our lives. The one for this coming week is sitting on my computer inside. Today I would say it's Musar, but it's not only Musar. It's
Sure.
study.
And of course that encompasses.
And the way, and you've heard me tell this story, some of you on Zoom may not have, on the stream may not have. My stumble into Musar was literally a stumble. My longtime study partner, we study every week, almost 52 weeks a year, unless one of us is on vacation or has a funeral. Lately on Zoom. 1 year, about 13, 14, 15 years ago, he said, you know, I love what we're studying Midrash, but would you mind if we do something different? And my answer then, and I think I've came to realize this has always been my answer, I don't care what I study, I care that I study. But now it's not only, but primarily Musar.
That's a good quote. Not that I don't care what I study, only that I study.
I think that's an authentic Jewish principle, and it's in Pirkei Avot. I didn't invent it. The quote is me, but, and I said this maybe in class the other night. You weren't there, but Jim was. Pirkei Avot, which is from the early centuries of the Common Era, the Ethics of the Fathers is the old translation of the title. Don't say when I have time, when I have leisure, I will study. Perhaps you will never have leisure. So building study into my routine, not just teaching, which I love, that's my greatest passion probably. Study so that I can teach.
Yeah.
And that's a phrase from the prayer book. Had we had our service, we would have seen it.
Yeah.
At, Lilamed Lilmod, learn and teach. Every congregation I have served, including when I was installed here in 1987, that's been part of my installation sign. I have studied in order to share, to teach.
That's what we at RILA, the leadership program. That's called the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards. RILA.
When I was here in Jackson for 5 years, my youngest brother, 6 years younger than me, was working for Rotary at the time.
Doing what?
I don't remember.
Well, Rotary's great. It's everywhere, and I love getting people involved.
Only
in it.
Rotary luncheon I ever went to was here in Jackson.
Okay.
But I'm not gonna tell that story right now. It was
I'll have to get you
memorable.
invited to another one. I can connect you.
Okay.
But I was gonna say that we call, in our program, we call it, lead back, which is, we learn a lot from the program, then go out and use those lessons in the world,
Pay
grow
it
as people, learn something new from our own experiences, bring it back and add more into it, so.
Anything else from the online folks? before
Not,
we-
not online, just a smiley face from Steve.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, my other question was, I love asking people is, like, if you just have just a favorite quote in general, cause I love inspirational quotes or just quotes, and my half question was, when are your office hours when you're here, so I could stop by and take you out to lunch or talk more?
Email me.
Okay.
The truth is, since I arrived in August, not so much in July, I don't have office hours.
Okay.
But I'm here all day.
That's what I call them.
I'm here all day. Like, I come in, first of all, I also have other gigs. So very often I'm in my office teaching a Musar group somewhere in Boston or Western Mass in the morning, or attending meetings for my other work. So I'm here, especially since my family's not, I'm here most of the day. So, but the answer is, I'll give you this week's example. On the plane Monday, other than today and Tuesday night's class and Wednesday night's confirmation class and my other commitments outside of Jackson, there was nothing on my calendar. By the time the plane landed, I already had a full spate of appointments.
Yeah.
And once people, so
I
sending
know how
an
this
email
goes.
is the easiest answer.
Yeah, my thing too is, it's like, not necessarily people setting up appointments with me, I'm usually the one trying to set up interviews or something, but, depending on Jackson State's result today, I'm going to Atlanta next weekend, and it's like
Wonderful.
this and that, it's all, so much stuff.
Wonderful,
So.
that's great.
But yes, but do you have a favorite quote? And is there some, mine also changes over time, but you don't have, you can think about it, we'll get back to that, but I love different things.
I think.
What stands out to people always interests me.
I'll give you two biblical quotes. I can't say they're my favorite, but they're way up there, certainly in my Torah lines. Leviticus chapter 19, the chapter after. God spoke to Moses saying, Kadoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall be holy as I, your God, am holy. The rest of the chapter and the rest of the Musar tradition and much of Jewish tradition, when it's not bogged down in sacrifices and ritual laws and all that, is all about how do we become holier people. The other is from Deuteronomy chapter 30. I set before you this day good and evil, life and death. Good and evil, blessing and curse, life and death. Therefore choose life. It was in our Yom Kippur afternoon Torah portion, Yom Kippur morning Torah portion. Leviticus 19 is the Yom Kippur afternoon Torah portion. So I think those two are probably way up there for me. Choose life and be holy, but there are definitely others. Pirkei Avot, which I was introduced to by my 8th grade religious school teacher, is probably, I'm probably going to say this next Friday night in West Palm, I've never said it out loud before. I owe Mr. Brick, Roger Brick, haven't seen him since I was in 8th grade, a debt, because I believe that my curiosity and my thirst for ongoing study, and ultimately my pursuit of this Musar stuff, goes back to the 8th grade class he taught us on Pirkei Avot. let's stop there. Shabbat Shalom. Sorry it wasn't a service, but I hope this had some meaning. If anybody wants to have a cup of coffee, I'm back January 9th. I'm here this week, but the dance card is full. So, and my wife's coming tomorrow, so I told her I wouldn't book myself too strenuously so I can take her around and show her what's happened here in Jackson. And Shabbat Shalom for those who want to stick around for Torah study. I know you can't. We're going to start in about half an hour.
I've got my guitar here, so I can keep streaming if anyone wants to join in on some tunes.
Go for it. Go
Got
for it.
my, actually, the reason I learned guitar, not the reason I learned guitar, the way I finally did was when I was in, after Bar Mitzvah, we had the Hebrew high school. You probably are familiar with Barge. Well, Barge was ended. Barge was no longer in existence.
Right, but when I was in Bergen County, this probably connects to the story you asked me about inspiration. Why did I go into the rabbinate? I was the only rabbi in Bergen County they would allow to come teach at Barge.
Why is that? I mean, congratulations, but why?
Because the other rabbis would come in and talk at the students, and they were losing the students. And then there was a year where Barge collapsed, or I forget what happened. And I invited my students and I think from a few other synagogues, come and I'll just teach you. Because if there's not going to be Barge this year, that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember, but
Barge,
the Bergen Academy of Reform Judaism, it was a community-wide high school program because nobody could, on their own, sustain post-bar mitzvah a viable program for.
Yeah. So Barge, I did attend, my first year of Barge was the last year of Barge, which was it was either my 8th grade or 9th grade year, I forget which one technically would have been. No, you know what, it had to be 9th grade. It had to be 9th grade, because 8th grade was when I was bar mitzvah, so.
Yeah, I think Barge was 9th grade.
Yes, yeah, it was 9th grade, so 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So that would have been 2011 into 2012.
Okay.
Was
I
first year.
left in summer of '99.
So the beginning of the end started pretty early then, but we don't need to go into that now, though I am familiar with much of the story. But we then started off what we called TASTE, Temple Avodat Shalom Teen Experience, which became Barge and other temples could join.
Right.
But then at some point it really was just people, after the people who had gone to Barge, initially, you know, then it was, I was in 10th grade, so then it was 11 and 12. The people who had gone before, older than me, then it, you know, it was just the Temple of Avodat Shalom. I don't think there were really others from many other synagogues who joined anymore. I don't think anything exists now. If the reason the merger happened with now what they call Kol Dorot, because our temple, the Temple of Avodat Shalom, had no more religious school, but had money and owned the building and had people. But Kol Dorot, Beth Or, mixture, had the building and didn't have a building, didn't really have, but they had a lot of young people and a whole school. So now they've got both together. Anyway, one of the things that happened my 10th grade year, I was just talking with people. I was like, you know, I've always wanted to learn how to play guitar. It's just a thing. I just want to learn one day how to play guitar. And our rabbi educator there, you know, her name is Paula Feldstein. And
Yes, I know Paula Feldstein.
see, I haven't mentioned that one yet too. We'll have to talk about it. I love her. We haven't spoken.
Her husband's a rabbi too.
Yes, I forget his name though, but he was at Temple.
Milstein Jordan.
He was at Temple Sinai.
Sinai and Tenafly.
Yes.
I knew him when
Yes,
I was
Jordan.
a little kid. His father was a rabbi who was one of the rabbis at my confirmation retreat.
Ah, wow. See, the small world continues. I find that rabbis, and we'll talk about this at some point over lunch, but rabbis and sports reporters, we have very much in common. But of course, my parents being involved as they were, and I have an interesting story of how we even joined the temple to begin with that we could talk about at some point if you're interested. But I was involved from 2nd grade on in the synagogue, and now I love obviously I show up and I find this is very important to me, and somehow there were 40 of us, that became 5 of us, that became 3 of us, that became 1 of us.
Right.
I think I'm the only one still actively involved in any capacity
Right.
of all 40 that I remember. But anyway, they were like, you know, like we could like do, so we had the main course and the elective, probably was the same when you were there. And so Rabbi Feldstein said, we could just do a song leading elective, and I'll teach you how to play the chords, and we can make that's the connection there. And I was like, I was not very involved in NIFTY. I did go to some events, but I didn't really go on the retreat stuff. So I didn't know. We joked at Temple of Dutch Shalom when I was growing up that we were Reform Judaism, but in a traditional conservative fashion. We didn't really have guitar playing.
Yes,
and
I
stuff.
want Temple River Edge. What was the name before?
It was Temple Shalom. With an
Temple
O,
Shalom,
with
and
an O,
it merged with Avodah
which then became Temple of Adat Shalom.
right,
with an A.
and now with Beth Or. But it was always more traditional than my synagogue in Teaneck. Though.
Not that I knew too much until I left and then learned more. I also, this had no influence on this obviously, but I do remember my youngest memories of being Jewish and going to services was at the Jewish Community Center of Spring Valley, which is where my great grandfather was rabbi, and
Who's your great grandfather?
David Meltzer.
No name, didn't know. Okay.
That's where I get David from. That's my name, and that's my dad's grandfather, my dad's mom's dad. And anyway, but my family was still involved there until I was in second grade. I always remember looking down the staircase. I was like, that's where the Hebrew school is. I'll go there one day. Never happened. Not because I didn't go to Hebrew school, but because
It was
my well, yeah, 20, 30 minutes, and my grandparents, my mom's parents actually still lived in the area. My dad's parents didn't. My mom also, her family went there, but so my dad and mom knew of each other, but they didn't meet till way after they went to high school together. My mom just knew my dad as like the rabbi's grandson.
Right.
But they said that my grandparents were not really
Anybody
going.
still there?
Yeah, actually, more people than we've had this whole time are now on.
Really? Hi, everybody. Anybody have a question? I guess we won't take a break.
Question, or I could lead in song with my guitar that I have and do a few.
Anybody
Jewish
have a
songs.
question? We
But I
didn't have anything even close to a million today. We would have started with less than a million.
We have 4 people on, but if you want to stick around, we're asking the rabbi, and I'll play my guitar for a few minutes because I brought it with me, and that will be very spiritual for me. But
I just want to check out some of these books.
Yeah, go ahead.
go along.
There's a collection of books on the table over here that were donated by a member of our community who grew up here yesterday, 144 books. And as I told you, if it's not Jewish, feel free to take it. If it's Jewish, not necessarily the author, it may end up in our collection. But if it's
Dr.
I just realized I don't have my yarmulke on this whole time.
Ralph Daniel.
Oh, Dr. Daniel.
Okay,
Yes.
it is what it is.
He's a dermatologist.
No, I think he's an internist, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
But anyway, my uncle gave me his old guitar, and then it was like a 3/4, and then I eventually got this one. So I learned on the other guitar, which I still have back in New Jersey. It's a piece of garbage. I got it like restrung. It was like 60 years old right now. But not that that's a problem, but for the guitar, the wood, the strings, it's just collapsing. But then I got this guitar, and I learned, and literally, I've kept it in here this whole time. This is my folder of all of the stuff that Rabbi Feldstein gave me over the years. Here we go. It's like right where I left it all those years ago. Still.
Yep.
So.
Well, lead us in a tune, and then we'll take a break and set the room for Torah study. And were there any questions on the chat from the newer people?
No, that was that.
Okay.
How about
Steve says
Shalom
Shabbat
Rav?
Shalom.
Thank you.
I have Shalom Rav. I can
Shalom
do
Rav.
Shalom Rav.
Shalom
Yeah, I
Rav.
take requests.
Like Ben does it.
So I will.
I don't know how Ben does it, but I
add
can do it how I
this,
do it.
how this brief story. Shalom Rav was composed in 1974, 50 years ago, by Cantor Jeff Klepper, who was a very significant figure because for me, he was the head song leader in my first summer at the Eisner camp. Had a lot to do with teaching me how to song lead, and Rabbi Dan Freelander, who's still, both of them are still friends. They just had a 50th anniversary. I was at their first concert. They just had a 50th anniversary concert a few weeks ago, but it was in New York. I couldn't get there, and I was teaching that night. But it's on YouTube, and they are responsible for a whole host of melodies that we sing. But Shalom Rav, which now is even sung in Orthodox communities. Get that? A Reform
The Orthodox seal of approval?
Well, just, it's culture. It becomes, I talked about this last night. Tunes just catch on, and sometimes we think of them as Me Sinai from Sinai.
Yeah,
Of course they're not.
Very interesting.
But they're old, and everybody says, well, that's the most classic melody. Like Shema Yisrael.
Or the one that we know.
Okay, but we didn't sing that one last night. We sang we sang both because of the Torah service. We sang a version of the Shema, as I explained last night, written in the 1970s by an Israeli rock star. So what is traditional is in the eyes of the beholder.
And when the day comes that I get to
There are
lead a
Orthodox
service,
communities
I have
now
plenty.
that sing the Mikra Berach that we sing, that Debbie Friedman, may she rest in peace, wrote. It's only 30 years old as a composition, maybe less. And there are communities across the line, and people will say, no, that's the traditional one. No, it's 30 years old. But yes, that's how traditions grow. Go back to your question, Jim. Judaism is an evolving tradition.
Yes.
And let's not get stuck in, let's not ignore what our traditions have been, but remaining dynamic and open to modifications and evolution are critical. And what has enabled Judaism to survive
Yes.
all of its challenges, all the way back to biblical times, is our ability to adapt from an agrarian society to an urban context, from sacrifice to prayer and study, from singing the old traditional melody, it's traditional because that's what you grew up with,
Yep.
to a new one that 50 years now later has grown into what everybody knows as the melody for Shalom Rav. It was written by two
Yeah.
relatively kids, late teens, early 20s, in 1974. Go ahead.
That's what my family talks about too. They're like, when they joined Temple Shalom originally, they were not used to there being an organ. And they were like, wow, this is like a different sound. This is so weird,
Right.
different.
Right, and most Reform synagogues,
Then they got
not
piano.
all, don't use an organ anymore, just like we don't. We did when I was
They don't
here.
have it. They have piano.
We have piano, we now have an electric digital instrument that can sound like anything. And many of the conservative synagogues that I go to nowadays use instruments.
Mm. But I never grew
So
again. I
again,
never,
but that was forbidden because they used instruments in the temple, and we can't do what they did in the temple. And you know what? Judaism has survived.
Can
by
we
the
worship outside the temple?
Yes, that's also.
Well,
a
if they only did worship, we could only worship.
They didn't
in
do
the
worship,
temple.
they did sacrifice. And yes,
But-
that is a debate that was very heated in the early rabbinic period. Can you worship outside of the land of Israel, outside of Jerusalem?
But
Or offer
if you're,
sacrifices.
you're at the synagogue for the purpose of sacrifice, which is
No,
For the purpose of-
synagogue was never about sacrifice. Never,
the,
never.
the,
The temple in Jerusalem,
that different.
that's why we call
I-
synagogues, some of us call synagogues temples.
I call
Because
it-
they're a reminder of the temple. It used to be, when I was growing up, that Orthodox folks
Mhm.
would look down and say, you go to a temple, you don't go to a synagogue. There are Orthodox synagogues that call themselves temple, whatever you want to call it. So like,
There
it's
is but one temple, and that was destroyed.
correct. But this is,
And God forbid there should be a third temple.
so here's another favorite quote, David,
I forbid.
but it's me. When we broke ground and then when we dedicated the new refurbished building in Teaneck, I said, folks, this is wonderful. But both at the groundbreaking and the dedication, I said, ultimately, it's not about the building. It's about what we do when we gather in the building.
Mhm.
Part of my influence for that, in truth, is Rabbi Harold Kushner. But may he rest in peace, who I first heard here in Jackson.
Now, isn't
And
his
became a
son-in-law
friend teacher in
related to the
college.
Trump family one way or another?
No, different Kushners. God
Different
forbid.
Kushners.
Different Kushners. Go ahead. Give us a tune, and we're going to stop and set the room for Torah study.
Sure, you're on a Shalom Rav, so.
Sure, why not?
Now, I haven't played this in a while, and also I can tell I haven't really picked up my guitar in the past few weeks.
Yeah,
It's
the
football season,
calluses
because
go
my calluses
away,
are gone.
right,
Which
right.
I was afraid of when I first got them, that they'd never come off. Then I learned, give it a month, and they do, and
Yes.
it's been about a month, so we'll see if I can even make it through it, but. Not that my brother is the opera performer, so he's got the voice, but the joke is that I use my voice also to talk, and he uses it to sing, so that's our profession. So what, and is there a particular reason you chose Shalom Rav?
Well, just band
Because we
ladies.
need
been a while.
peace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was the second one in my list of songs that I pulled out here, so. Let me see if I can match the key. You get it?
It's the right key.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Nasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Nasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lekol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lekol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Nasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Nasim Leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בצלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Nasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Nasim Leolam. Nasim Leolam. Nasim Leolam.
Thank you, David.
Took me a
Thank
second to get the calluses
to those of you who
work.
joined us remotely. Shabbat Shalom. For those, well, for Jim, David has to go to work.
We have 5 people now.
We're going to take a 15-minute break, set up for Torah study, and then we'll pick up then. I don't know, do we leave the stream on for Torah study? or we don't?
Usually you log into Zoom, which is it's a different day.
Okay.
It's on the,
Do you know how to
log
s-
it there.
can you-
I think it's there. I got
Okay.
the instructions for how to live stream, but
Okay.
I think they're on the computer.
All right,
so.
we'll check it out. Everybody be well. I'm around till Thursday morning early, and then I'll be back on January 9th. Have a wonderful Hanukkah if I don't see
We
you.
do that every Friday night. Love that song. It's
Talk
the
to
right
Ben.
vibe for me. I mean, we do meet from polka. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a biggie.
I'm gonna go, forgive me, I'm gonna go reset
Yeah.
what I need. You can
I'm gonna
sing a
move.
song.
I'll help you with the table. I'll
Okay,
put the
thank
tables
you.
in a
You
second
guys set
here.
up the tables.
Well, we have 6 people on the live stream now. Just now, the most people.
Who
Tell us
joined?
who you are in the chat if you're on the live stream. We didn't have services this morning, but we had a wonderful thing. You'll be able to.
No
replay.
guilt, if you'd all been here, we would have had a service, but there were 3 of us.
Yeah, no.
9:20.
They could repent on Yom Kippur for not showing up.
No guilt. We did,
Uh,
I hope this was
now
at
we're
least
down
a
to 4.
meaningful use of the time.
I enjoyed it.
No
I enjoyed
guilt,
it.
and how do you play Gradle?
But I take song requests
That's
now
good.
for the next.
I know.
3 minutes. Now that I have guitar, 3 minutes of song requests, then that's it. So put your song requests into.
doorbell, please.
Yes. Put your
Yes,
song
sir.
requests into the YouTube chat if you have a song request. In you live my soul. In you live my soul. No, it's gotta be higher than that. Doesn't say what key it was.
Octave lower would be better.
Yeah, well, no, it's an octave higher because it needs to get back up into my key. I'm not a singer, so it's not going to come out good either way. But we're praying, so God can put it in the right key. You live my soul, I think it's got to be on 3. C is 3. You live my soul. No, it's not that one either. Where is it? It doesn't even have it on here. Oh, you know what? There's another one right here on the bottom. No, that's not it either.
Well,
Probably have it on a different page because usually each page of this. Oh, there it is. Look at that. I
Do
found
you
it.
have
It's right in the front.
actually the theme from Exodus, the movie?
I don't have that on guitar, but I played that in high school band. It's the first ever song I played in
Oh,
high school band.
the vocal of it is from Half Moon, you know.
Yeah.
He
Here's this one.
wrote the lyrics.
See, here's every page I have has the cape over now, and so I didn't have it for that one because I had Shalom Rav on that page. But here's this one. Yeah, that sounds better right away. Yehi-yu-le-ra-so. There you go. Have you ever heard Yehi-yu-le-ra-so? Play this one? I was gonna do this one as part of the service today, but Yehi, there you go. Yehi-yu-le-ra-so, ni-re-mi, re-mi, de-yo, li-mi, de-fa-de-fa. Yehi-yu-le-ra-so, ni-re-mi, re-mi, de-yo, li-mi, de-fa-de-fa. Adonai to me, Adonai to me, Adonai to me, Bego Ami, Adonai to me, Adonai to me, Adonai to me, Bego Ami, Yehi-yu-le-ra-so, ni-re-mi, re-mi. There's that. Alright, let's see if there's one more that is a nice one. You got Shavua Tov, but that's not a Shabbat song, it's a Havdalah song.
Well.
Shalom Rob, here, oh, Ki Moed. Let's see, got Lador Vador, of course you do. Mi Kamocha, clear favorite. Got the Miriam song, do you know the Miriam song? We don't really do that here. Roll Into Dark, I remember learning that one. Got Master / Creator of All Things. Have you ever heard that one?
Perhaps it might be a good one to do after we get the table set up.
I think I'm gonna put my guitar away, and then we'll help, and then I'm gonna set the table up, and that'll be it. I don't see anyone else showing up here. Alright. Do you wanna hear that one? Then I'm gonna put this
No,
away.
that's fine.
You good?
Okay.
You telling me I'm a bad singer?
Shalom Rob.
Shalom Rob's your main request.
Yeah, well, Bob Dylan's not exactly the best either. And they sold this song for $500 million.
I figured I brought the guitar. Might as well end with a closing song as we would have during